Welcome back to the Sounds of the Mountains, or at least to my little corner of the mountains here in Northeast Tennessee. I mentioned in another story video that I have taken up a pandemic pastime, quilting. Now, I'm not very good at it, but I'm learning. And so behind me today, I have put a quilt that I've been working on for a while. It isn't finished. Someday maybe I'll get it done, but it seemed appropriate for this story. You'll also notice, of course, that I'm wearing a hat today. It's a hat that has a lot of special meaning to me. It was my husband's very favorite hat. So I remember that he was wearing it the first time at the National Storytelling Festival here in Jonesboro that I told this particular story. So I wear the hat in memory of him, and also because I'm having a bad hair day. This story is called Orpheus and Eurydice. I wish you had known Orpheus. He was a fine musician. What he was a picker. Not your everyday picker, no. He was Tom T., Jerry Lee, Willie, and Chet all rolled into one. Some people say that Orpheus's mama must have had an in with the muses because that boy had rhythm and blues in his genes like nobody had ever seen before. When Orpheus started out in the music business, he was hired by a fella named Jason. You might remember Jason. People called him the old fleece chaser. He had this boat called the Argo. And his roadies, well, they were also the rowers for the boat. And they were called the Argonauts. And so Jason hired on Orpheus to play music for the Argonauts. They would be out rowing across the water and they would be dog-tired, but they needed to make a few extra miles that day to get to the next gig. Orpheus could pick out cadence on his guitar better than a coxswain for a rowing team from the Ivy Leagues could yell it. And so the Argonauts would pick up speed and they would make those miles they needed to make. It was also thanks to Orpheus and his music that when the Argonauts were tired and they were on R&R and their muscles were aching all over, well, that music would massage their muscles until the strength came back to row again the next day. One time, Orpheus really saved their bacon. They were on their way to this gig when all of a sudden the sound of the sirens come across the waves. The sirens were this girl band that had this strong, repetitive hook. And whenever men heard that sound, they would be drawn to it, enchanted by it. Now, if those girls had had a better location, they could have broke all attendance records. You've heard about folks getting trampled at rock concerts. It was worse than that when the sirens played. Those girls could kill you with their music. The Argonauts started rowing toward that island where the sirens were playing. Well, Orpheus knew they were in trouble. He had to get them out of there. So he started picking out some fancy licks on his guitar. He had a stronger repetitive hook than those sirens who, well, they were like Dolly Parton and Barbra Streisand on a twin bill, but Orpheus was even better. He got them out of the sound until they were safe. If it hadn't been for Orpheus, that would have been the last curtain call for Jason and the Argonauts. But you know, the story that people like to tell about Orpheus is not so much about his music as it is about his flat-out bad luck love life. Orpheus had a lady named Eurydice. Now, she was beautiful, and she was kind, People noticed that whenever Orpheus started hanging out with her, his music got better and better. Up until then, nobody had even heard of Eurydice. They decided to get married. People were happy to come to that wedding. It was a big outdoor do with more brew and barbecue than could feed the entire state of Texas. After the wedding ceremony, Eurydice decided to go for a little walk in the meadow with some of her bridesmaids, probably trying to encourage them on their prospects of marriage. What do you know? Out of the blue, a poisonous viper up and bit her. Married 5 minutes and bit by a deadgum snake. It killed her. After Eurydice died, Orpheus just didn't care about his music anymore. He didn't care about anything anymore. He sat around on rocks. He drank too much, he smoked too much, and he slept too little. A quote from Shakespeare comes to mind. "When you depart from me, sorrow abides, and happiness takes his leave." Orpheus could have stayed depressed like that. People would have forgot all about him. Nobody would even remember anything about who he was or the music he played. But that's not what Orpheus did. No, he made up his mind. He was going to go and get Eurydice out of the underworld. He was going down to see Hades and talk him into letting him have Eurydice back. So he started out on his journey. He didn't take any weapons with him. No bow and arrow, no axe. That wasn't his style. All he took was his guitar. It's not easy to get in to see Hades. It was a long journey that Orpheus had to make. He traveled for days and days, and then he came to this place called the Styx, 'cause it was. It was this dark, mucky river that he had to get across. When he got to the other side, and he came to the gate that led into Hades' underworld, he saw that it was guarded by this dog, this 3-headed dog named Cerberus. That pup had been keeping folks out of there for as long as anybody could remember. Nobody got past Cerberus. No, Cerberus had these teeth. They were like 9-inch nails. He would chew you up if you tried to get through that gate to see Hades. Orpheus got up as close as he could to Cerberus. And he sat down and he began to pick out a tune on his guitar. Nobody knows what that tune was. I like to imagine that maybe it was an Oak Ridge Boys tune. And that dog just couldn't handle it because it kept trying to go from 4-part to 3-part harmony in its heads. But maybe it was just some simple tune. Because, you know, when Orpheus played, it was like listening to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and the Boston Pops playing and singing together. It was just glorious. Maybe it just mellowed out those 3 dog heads. And Orpheus got past that dog and he got in to see Hades. He sat down with Hades. They were in this cave-like room with fires glowing all around. Orpheus talked real logical to Hades. He told him he didn't want anything that didn't rightfully belong to him. He just wanted to bring Eurydice back up to the earth for a while. He said it was just a matter of time before Hades got Eurydice anyway, and what was time to the man? He said that it wasn't fair what had happened. You see, people when they're young, they think life's supposed to be fair, and then they get old and they realize that it's not. While he was talking to Hades, he was playing music on his guitar. Who knows, maybe that music mellowed out Hades. And he said, all right. He said that Orpheus could take Eurydice back up to the earth with him. He said there was one condition. Neither one of them could look back until they got all the way up out of Hades' territory. Orpheus agreed. He set out, heading back up toward the earth on that long journey, and he couldn't look back at Eurydice. He wanted desperately to lay eyes on her again. Of course, she probably didn't look very good, what with having been dead all that time. But once she breathed the fresh air from earth again, she would be her beautiful self. He knew that. Well, he kept walking. He heard footsteps behind him. He knew she was there. He hoped she was keeping up. He finally saw that hole that led up to the earth right ahead, and he pulled up out of that hole, and he waited a minute or two. And when he heard the sound of her coming up, he spun around and looked back. I don't know what happened. Maybe she got her foot caught in her dress or something, but she wasn't all the way up out of that hole. And when he looked at her, he had broken Hades' rule, and she disappeared right before his eyes. He knew it was over then. You can't go back begging to the man twice. At that moment, the words he said have stuck in my mind. The bud was plucked before the flower bloomed. If that boy had had half the interest in writing the lyrics that he had in picking out tunes, we'd still be singing his songs today. Well, after he lost her that second time, he went on playing his music, but he didn't care about it anymore. He didn't care about anything anymore. He took gigs that were too rough in places he shouldn't have been. One day, a bunch of mean, riled up bullies just tore Orpheus to pieces. The folks who loved him, they gathered up the bits and pieces of his body that they could find, and they buried him. Some folks say it was in Austin. Others say, no, it was in Nashville. But whichever it was, that's why the music is a little sweeter down that way. And that's the story of Orpheus and Eurydice.
Thank you for watching. A big shout out of thanks to our sponsors, and thank you for donating using the buttons or the links below. We need your gifts at Camp Bethel. Thank you very much.
We hope the festival will be back home in person next year and need your help in getting the camp ready to reopen as soon as possible for summer camps, guest groups, and special events like the festival. Please click on the link below and make your contribution toward the work, the fun, and the fellowship that find a home at Camp Bethel. Thanks for watching, and thank you for your gift.